Hey everybody, it's AB Stoddard at The Bulwark. I'm back with Grand Poobah of The Bulwark, Bill Crystal, who actually has titles. He is the co-author of Morning Shots. You got to read it today. It's amazing. And he writes it with Andrew Egger, and then he is also editor at large, and he's my good friend. And Bill, welcome to the darkest, most voluminous, most fast-paced news cycle of our lifetime. There's just too much going on. I think that we share the view, which people will read in Morning Shots today, that the convention is really hard to watch, but what's happening is important, right? So, I mean, really the takeaways are really critical. Very interesting kind of break open of the pro-internationalist versus isolationist camps of the party. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, it's Jonathan Martin in Politico today had some really interesting quotes. I'll just read one and then you can take off. Ken Calvert, who oversees military spending as the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee chair, said, according to a person familiar with the exchange, the Ukrainians better hurry up and win.
It's very helpful advice. Whatever would have occurred to the Ukrainians is they should try to win, and as fast as possible. It's like, no, it's terrible. And of course, the good news is you don't have to watch these conventions. You can read transcripts and get at least some, and then read Sam Stein's reporting for us and other reporting and get a sense of what's going on. And it is just too depressing to actually listen to someone like Nikki Haley, who was making a decent case against Trump and who seemed to care about Ukraine. Just like, what obvious issue.
It is in the best interest of America. It's in the best interest of our national security for Ukraine to win. We have to see this through. We have to finish it.
Where Vance is at the absolute other extreme. And now she gives a speech, Trump will be fine. And she focused on foreign policy. I kind of expected she might not mention foreign policy, but no, Trump's strong on national security. He's stronger America. We wouldn't have had this war if Trump were still there.
When Donald Trump was president, Putin did nothing. No invasions. No invasions, no wars. That was no accident. Putin didn't attack Ukraine because he knew Donald Trump was tough.
So the capitulation is pretty thorough, obviously. And the Vance pick is important. I think, we've all written about that at the Bulwark, but it does signify something. I mean, the other picks, ultimately, it was Trump's party, obviously. They would have gone along with Trump, the Tim Scotts and the Marco Rubios of the world. They were, in fact, cravenly going along with him for months. But still, to get Vance, that's a real doubling down on America first, doubling down on other aspects of Trumpism, too. But I do think it's a vulnerability for them if there were a Democratic ticket that could take advantage of it, because we know from polling, we know from Haley's own votes and reports from the Haley campaign of what caused people, in her opinion, to vote, at her pollsters' opinion, to vote for her, that the Republican Party is not all in on abandoning Ukraine or being pro-Putin. It's probably a little better than 50-50 the other way. Mike Johnson, the very conservative Speaker of the House, led, about 100 House members to vote for the aid to Ukraine, a majority of Republican senators. So there, Vance is really out in the far edges of the party, I'd say. And that's an opportunity to drive a wedge. But if no one drives a wedge, all the others are just going to say, well, we're going to work it out after the election. And I think Trump's strength means that we don't need to even send more aid or God knows what.
It's amazing. I was also taken aback by this quote from Mark Short, Mike Pence's top aide for many, many years. I think what we're witnessing now is a full-on frontal assault on conservatism. And you look at the platform walking away from issues like life, a traditional marriage, embracing tariffs across the board. And then he said, I feel like yesterday and last night went a step further when you have speakers basically saying NATO is at fault for the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It's really out there, right? It's like, I mean, David Sachs, the first night, it's really, it's over. I mean, it is a departure. It is a new party, and there's no reason to even talk about Nikki Haley because she's never coming back in this party. There's no future for her because she came around and endorsed Trump, right? It's Vance, it's Trumpism and Vanceism, or Don Jr.-ism going forward.
Tucker Carlson has a more prestigious speaking slot than Nikki Haley.
Yeah. Oh, well, Nikki Haley doesn't matter. I mean, right? I think there was a hope that if Trump had chosen Rubio or Burgum, And they all fantasize that he will go quietly off into the night at some point as a senior citizen, that there was going to be, right, this kind of revitalization of the Republican Party. They could return to some of their principles. Mike Johnson risked his career to pass security aid for Ukraine, right? That I think that they maybe hoped for that. But now, no, there's no, Nikki Haley's could fantasize with Rubio as VP that she would be speaking in a hall, eating shit, basically. But that years from now, she was going to have a path back. No way.
And they could fantasize that in the actual Trump administration, if there is one, this Trump's second term, there'd be at least sort of like 2017 to 2021, a tug and a pull and a push, a tugging and hauling between the different policy options. And there would be some people in there resisting some of the worst aspects, in my opinion, of America First. And obviously, as the Trump administration, the first term went on, those people tended to depart, and the thing got much more Trumpy, let's call it, and Vance-like in terms of everything from trying to overturn the election, obviously, to the threats to use the military domestically, and then and foreign policy as well. And then those last 2 months of November, December were pretty horrifying. And that's what we're going to get. So the notion that, Nikki Haley can be a behind the scenes player, that wasn't totally crazy, I think, if Rubio's VP or if Tim Scott's VP, but now it is. And so I think the Vance pick is important. I mean, people, Trump's such a dominant figure that you think, well, the VP, it's just, he got it by sucking up to Trump. And there are interesting articles about how he did that skillfully and so forth. But he believes, I think he's come to believe what he maybe opportunistically started off believing. That's his brand. He's not changing. And he's going to move in that direction. Incidentally, he's going to be much more systematic than Trump about staffing the administration down through the ranks with people like this. He's not going to let some H.R. McMaster or Fiona Hill or Alexander Vindman sneak in to the National Security Council. Trump pays no attention. But so I think one shouldn't underestimate rather how important the Vance pick is, and terrible from a policy point of view, from my point of view.
Also, the elevation of Donald Trump Jr., who really argued for the Vance pick, is tight with Vance, argued for his help in the Senate race originally in 2022 from his father, and who is now on the record saying that he would like to be in charge of not all hiring, but overseeing it to keep away the rhinos and the bad guys. So everything you just described from the first administration is over with. Moving more importantly to, if Biden continues, we all, you and I agree, and increasingly Democrats do, that if Biden, if Biden runs, the party's rolling over and letting Trump win. He's positioned to win well now, and the effort to try to talk Biden out of it was ongoing until the attempted assassination of former President Trump Saturday. Now there's a Republican convention ongoing, and there's furious conversations taking place behind the scenes, confrontations, but it's staying quiet. It's not public. You wrote about this morning. Biden is now becoming very belligerent and angry and delusional, remaining delusional. And this is becoming a really ugly situation, which I think doesn't help Biden. I think it's actually likely to really embolden his critics. And so he balls out Jason Crow on a phone call with the New Dem coalition. The tape is leaked. You had it in Morning Shots. Jonathan Martin is now reporting today on a Blue Labs Analytics memo that circulates. They polled 15,000 voters in 7 swing states. So that's a good amount of people, and everyone but Biden comes out 3% or more. If you include, on average, if you include Kamala Harris, but she is not the favorite. She's at the bottom of the list. They want a fresh start, and the list without ranking. These are in alphabetical order and not in polling position, okay? Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, Governor Wes Moore of Maryland, Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, and Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, outpacing Biden by roughly 5 points across battleground states. So, Bill, talk about this, the state that this effort is in, and where you think it'll go, and when it'll become public again, because it needs to be.
Just on the polling for 1 second, yeah, that's 5 points is a lot. I mean, we're in an extremely polarized environment, and Democrats are going to vote for the Democratic nominee, in any case, presumably. To have a 5 point switch is really striking. It shows how much of a burden Biden is on the ticket. You also see it when you look at the Democratic senators in the same states, and they're running 10 points ahead of Biden in some cases. I think the polling issue's gotten clearer in the last 3 or 4 weeks. What I'm struck by in talking to people in this world of people who, some of whom for a long time, some of whom since the debate have thought Biden shouldn't go on, is people have focused a little less on the polling. Because at the end of the day, he could come back, people, you could have all kinds of excuses for the polls. They really are looking at his performance, though, and they can't defend it. I'm very struck how many people have sent me, people I don't know that well, some actual members of Congress, but more, people in that world, right? Send me clips of him in certain speeches and certain interviews that he's done. And just saying this is ridiculous. You can't have this guy running for president. We could all wish him well. He can do okay for sometimes reading for a teleprompter for some chunk of the speech, though even there in the speech to the NAACP, there are moments that are just unacceptable, really, I would say, honestly. I mean, and he's the president, so he gets a lot of deference. He's been a pretty good president. He deserves some deference, but it's not, you can't to say with a straight face that everything will be fine for the next 4 years if he's president. And I'm struck how many people are now really getting to that. So I think that's more damaging in a way to Biden. It's harder to rationalize that than to say, I don't know, polls sometimes change 4 points and maybe Biden will squeak it out, So I think that's been sort of significant. So, and the other thing I would say is, I think the media is a little bit, they have an attention span of 2 hours. So they can't pay attention to this because there's a Republican convention. And obviously, there's the assassination attempt, so nothing is happening. That's not quite right. I mean, there's been a lot going on. It's been a little behind the scenes, but that's mostly because Congress is out, actually. It's not like the members of Congress can't talk to each other, even if the Republicans are having a convention. But I would say the most interesting thing that's happened for me is there is this plot to move up to have a virtual roll call and move up the nomination of Biden. Originally justified because Ohio had some flaky law that seemed to require that you go earlier. It's done. It's gone. It's total nonsense. There's no reason for it. But they still wanted to go ahead. Now, they have now pushed it back a little bit, a few days. And I think there was pretty big rebellion among House Democrats against that. They had a letter circulating that someone told me had 50 signatures or something saying don't do that. So that strikes me as there is some – they can't just impose their will. There's enough pushback that at least they have to pull back a little bit on this virtual roll call. Now, I hope they pull back entirely on it. It's ridiculous. There's no reason for it. And I hope the opponents keep pushing that. The person who led that, organized that letter writing campaign, you may know him, you know the Hill much better than I do, is Representative Huffman. Is that his name?
Jared Huffman from California.
Who's from the district next to Pelosi's, I think, Northern California, and is very near Pelosi's and very close to Pelosi. So everyone on the Hill assumes this is Pelosi. He's not a kind of guy who sticks his neck out, as he's not a Seth Moulton or a Jason Crow or something. So I think the Pelosi Jeffries type conspiracy is ongoing, but the clock is running. And at some point, they have to publicly get 150 of them and go to the White House and say, Mr. President, you got to forget it. This can't happen.
That's an interesting point. It's a different argument than the polls, or he did great in the last teleprompter speech or interview he gave, right? They can throw up national polls that they find always where he's neck and neck, and as we know, national polls don't matter. My argument is that the calling publicly for him to step aside, that stopped last Friday. And then 24 hours later, Trump was shot, and this has been frozen publicly. And they need to make an argument publicly about what you said, I think, which is that he can't serve another 4 years. Now, they will be called hypocrites for not saying that out loud in 2022 or 2023, like you and I did, which is that he was too old to serve out a second term. And that was before the performance of the debate. But I do think they're going to have to be, that's a little tricky, right? How do you, I mean, I think first of all, I do think he's inflaming them by being so angry and belligerent, by trying to rig it with a virtual roll call before the actual convention, where it would be too late to challenge him there. But I do think they have to move quickly, and they have to be very clear, don't you think, Bill, about that they cannot go home. And so the Morning Joe line is, you get behind him now because he's not stepping aside, and if you don't get behind him now enthusiastically, you're for Trump and you're helping Trump. I think that the critics of Biden, and James Carville has done a very good job of explaining it, but he's been alone. I think that the members have to come out, Adam Smith, Jim Himes, Seth Moulton, people who have already called for him to step down, don't you think, and say, look, we can't argue to our constituents that he's going to be a great commander in chief in 2027. I mean, I just feel like, I know that's hard, but letter writing and lots of Zoom calls doesn't seem to be working.
No, I agree. They have to go public, and it has to be a tougher message in a way. I also do think that Biden, I feel like there's a little more openness to that now, and this is based on fragmentary conversations, but because Biden's petulance and really self-absorption, and you see it in what I quoted in Morning Shots, which is the leaked audio from the Zoom call with the New Democrats and the exchange with Jason Crow. But there are now several instances of this, either directly quoted or reported, of the kind of arrogance one person said to me, I'm not sure, self-centeredness, solipsism, a lot of stuff that does go, unfortunately, with the kind of aging, incidentally, stubbornness, denial. So I think, I don't know, I feel like there's much less personal loyalty to them than there was a month ago. And some of that's just, these are politicians and the polls go down, you're less loyal, But honestly, people were still loyal to George H.W. Bush when he was, in deep trouble against Bill Clinton. It's not like there was, they did think, okay, it's unfortunate that he's sort of out of sync with the times, but he was, we're still not going to turn on him. Whereas I feel like with Biden, there's an actual beginning of almost anger at him. And I think it's unfortunately kind of justified. Now, whether that ever goes far enough, whether it penetrates enough, what is with Morning Joe? They got pulled off the air. I didn't really follow any of this. They were pulled off the air Monday, and suddenly they're back being totally pro-Biden. Is that what they think?
So right after the debate,
so tell me,
there was a marital difference. Joe Scarborough said after the debate, Democrats have to find another candidate. This is not going to work.
If this were Donald Trump, time and time again, we talked about the Goldwater. Where's the Barry Goldwater? To walk over and tell Richard Nixon it was over, to tell Donald Trump it was over. And now the question is, do Democrats need to do the same thing of Joe Biden?
Mika, his wife, said no, that she felt that it was a wake-up call. She wasn't at all trying to, trying to paint a rosy picture of the debate, that it was terrible, but that Joe Biden should be out there dispelling our fears.
I still believe in Joe Biden. I've learned that counting him out is always a mistake, and doing that now could be catastrophic for our country.
And so they had a divide, and he came right back around. And so now they're doing the Biden campaign line, which is like, everyone fall in line. If you don't, you're helping Trump.
And he's out there dispelling our fears, but he's out there and he's not dispelling our fears. I mean, this is an empirical question. It's not, maybe he should be dispelling it. Maybe our fears are irrational, but it's an actual matter of not just polling, but everyone you talk to kind of thing. No one thinks that the more you're seeing of Biden, the more reassured you are. That could have happened. There are times when guys have bad nights, or, in politics and everything else for that matter. And then you see more of them and you decide, well, okay, it's not quite, he just had a bad night. It's better than we thought. Or look, he is doing these interviews well, but we had Stephanopoulos, we had Lester Holt, we had various other interviews. The speeches are a little better because they're on teleprompter, or he knows exactly what he wants to say if it's a kind of stump speech and he remembers the talking points. But even there, or the lines he's used many times, even there they get sort of garbled, and you see the erosion from where he was even 6 months ago. That's the other thing I've heard from so many people. And this, I think, handles a little bit the problem you correctly pointed to. But why are they saying this now? They can say with some truth that, look, it seems more obvious now than it did 6 months ago. And so, it's all clearer that he can't just, sort of pretend this isn't happening.
they can take my argument, which is even if he performed well in all these interviews, and in some, he can, he's following conversation. He's giving it all he's got. I believe that what he did at that presser without a teleprompter or notes for an hour was something that Donald Trump could never, ever do. And he was completely in command of the facts, the narrative, the tensions, the nuances of the conflict in Gaza and the Middle East, war in Ukraine and Europe, the weaponization of NATO. I mean, the guy was on it, and you could see that he knew he was on it. My argument would be, even if you do well and every single thing passed the debate, it was followed by tons of leaks from people in your administration saying that this is happening. And you are now asking to be president of the United States until you're 86. And after what we saw and then what was reported, we are no longer comfortable with you being president until you're 86. I mean, it's pretty simple, right? Like, no one has to talk about how great he did in Detroit last Friday night with everyone, fighting for him and like giving him all his encouragement. That's sweet and that's great. But no one can campaign on the concept now that he should be commander in chief until he's 86. So, Bill, before we wrap up, let's just quickly hit the Republicans. J.D. Vance going to have a big night. Tucker's going to have a big night. And then Trump, we were told by Trump, who is a messiah now, and he's been chosen, that this completely changed him. And he ripped up his speech. He told Selena Zito of the Washington Examiner, and he's written a different one. What kind of different speech are you expecting tomorrow night?
I mean, Trump's never written a speech in his life, so, actually written it. So he told his people to get rid of some of the harsher sentences, right. I guess. I think there'll still be plenty of authoritarianism in there, but slightly authoritarianism with iron fist and maybe a bit of a glove, maybe one grace note about how he wishes President Biden well or something. I don't know, or he's learned a lot from this near brush with death. But I mean, he's a con man. He's smart. He knows that in this way, clever. He knows that he wants to milk this for all it's worth. Milking this for all it's worth means seeming to be moved by this and changed by this. But who knows? Maybe he was a little bit changed by it, but it's not clear to me. And again, the pick of Vance so outweighs everything else. I mean, that's real. If they win, he'll be vice president, and he cares a lot about putting loyalists in, and Don Jr. will be there next to him and so forth. That's real. All this other stuff, fine. Then if something else will happen to annoy Trump, it'll change again in a week. That doesn't matter. What matters is what we now see will be the character of this second term, the kind of administration it will be, the kind of big policy decisions they'll make on things like Ukraine.
Well, thank you, Bill. Everyone who's interested in the last two nights of the convention, which will be far more interesting than the first two, should follow our live coverage here at the Bulwark's YouTube channel. And Bill and I will see you next Wednesday.